The blackout hit at 9:17 on a Thursday night, right in the middle of a storm that had already been making the house feel older than it was. One second every lamp was on, the dishwasher was humming, and the TV in the living room was talking to nobody. The next, everything died so completely that the silence felt staged, like the whole neighborhood had been unplugged by someone standing just outside. I remember sitting upright on the couch and waiting for the power to kick back in. It didn't. Then, from somewhere upstairs, I heard a door close softly. I lived alone then. That part matters because I spent the first few seconds trying to explain the sound in a way that would let me stay calm. Maybe a draft. Maybe one of the doors upstairs hadn't latched properly and shifted when the air conditioning cut out. I even said that out loud. Like hearing it in my own voice would make it more believable, but the truth hit me almost immediately. The air had gone still with the power. There was no draft, no fan, no vent, just rain against the windows and a door upstairs that I knew I hadn't touched all day. I used the flashlight on my phone and checked the breaker panel first, mostly because it gave me a reason not to look upstairs right away. Every switch was fine. A neighborhood group message finally loaded. Whole block was out. Transformer probably blew. I stared at those messages longer than I needed to, because as long as I was reading them, I didn't have to think about the sound from the second floor. Then I heard footsteps. Not running, not heavy, just slow, measured steps crossing the hallway above me. 4 or 5 of them, each separated by the kind of pause that suggested whoever was making them knew there was no longer any background noise to hide inside. I froze between the kitchen and hall, flashlight pointed uselessly at the breaker box. I didn't call out. People always say they would yell or grab a weapon. What actually happens is your body starts making decisions before your pride does. Mine decided to stay perfectly still and listen. The footsteps stopped. I called my brother instead of the police. Maybe I still wanted someone familiar to tell me I was being stupid. He answered on the second ring, annoyed at first, until he heard how low I was talking. I told him the power was out and I thought someone might be upstairs. Then I heard something that made every hair on my arm stand up. A slow scrape, like wood dragging across wood. My bedroom chair. It had uneven legs and always made that exact sound on the floorboards. Someone was moving it. My brother told me to get out of the house. I should have, but stepping onto a pitch-black porch while not knowing whether someone was right above me felt worse. So I locked myself in the downstairs bathroom, turned my phone flashlight off, and sat in the dark listening. At first I heard nothing. Then the sound came again, directly overhead now. Another scrape, another, like the chair was being dragged inch by inch across the floor. Then silence, then one loud knock from above, sharp enough to make me jump. Not random, not something falling. A deliberate knock, as if whoever was up there wanted me to know exactly where they were standing. My brother stayed on the phone while he drove over. At some point he asked whether the front door had been locked before the power went out. I told him yes. Then I remembered the kitchen window over the sink. I had cracked it earlier and forgotten to latch it before the storm started. My stomach dropped. He told me not to move and said he was 5 minutes away. Those 5 minutes felt endless. The knocking started again, this time not overhead, across the hall. 3 slow taps against the bathroom door. I stopped breathing. Another 3 taps came, a little lower this time, as if the person on the other side had crouched down. Then came the voice. It was a woman's voice, soft and careful. "Can you help me?" I knew instantly that it was wrong, not because it sounded evil, it sounded normal. That was the problem. No panic, no confusion, no explanation. Just those 4 words, and spoken like we were somewhere ordinary. When I didn't answer, she knocked again and said, "I think there's someone in your house." I bit down on my sleeve to keep from making a sound. My brother heard the voice through the phone. I know he did, because his tone changed completely. He started shouting my name, telling me not to open the door, telling me he was outside. Then I heard his truck in the driveway, loud and sudden through the storm. The woman outside the bathroom door went silent. A second later, the floor above me creaked. She was upstairs again. My brother came in through the front door with a flashlight and a tire iron. He searched the first floor, then the second. Bedroom empty. Spare room empty. Closet empty. No broken glass, no forced lock, no muddy footprints from the storm. Nothing missing. Nothing disturbed. Except for one thing. The chair in my bedroom had been moved to face the hall, not just shifted, positioned. It was sitting directly in front of the doorway, angled outward, like someone had been using it to watch the stairs. On the seat was my phone charger, coiled neatly in a perfect circle. I never wrapped it like that. The police came and found nothing. One officer suggested stress. Another suggested storm noise got into my head once the power failed. I let them talk. My brother stayed the night, and the power came back around 2 in the morning. Every room lit up exactly the way it had before, but the house felt exposed now, like the darkness had peeled something back and electricity had only covered it again. I sold that place 3 months later. What still bothers me isn't that someone might have been inside. There are ways to explain that. What I can't explain is what my brother admitted the week I moved out. When he pulled into the driveway that night, before he came inside, he looked up at the second-floor window over the porch, and he saw the chair already there, facing out, with someone sitting in it. He thought it was me until the figure stood up without using its hands, stepped backward into the dark room, and disappeared before he reached the front door. The first thing I noticed when the power went out was that the humming stopped. It wasn't a loud sound before, just the refrigerator, the vent in the hallway, the cheap air purifier I kept near the stairs because the house always smelled faintly dusty in summer. But when everything died at once, the silence arrived like pressure. It settled over the room so fast that I became aware of things I normally never heard, like rain tapping the back windows and the faint shifting sound old wood makes when a house cools down. Then I heard the front door unlock. I was in the kitchen with my phone in one hand, staring at the dark microwave display, waiting to see if the power would flicker back. The click came from the far end of the house, clean and mechanical, followed by the tiny metallic sound the deadbolt made when it turned. I didn't move at first. My brain gave me a stupid explanation almost immediately. Maybe the outage had somehow affected the smart lock. Maybe it reset itself. Maybe I was hearing something else and forcing it into a shape that frightened me. Then the door opened. I couldn't see it from the kitchen, but I heard the seal break. Then the slow scrape of the bottom edge across the mat. After that came a pause so complete and deliberate that it felt like whoever was standing there knew exactly how loud the dark had become. I said, "Hello?" No answer. A second later, the door closed again. I lived in that house alone for almost 2 years, and I had routines for everything because routine makes an empty place feel controlled. Lock front door by 8. Check back slider before bed. Keep my keys on the hook near the pantry. Never leave lights on upstairs when I was downstairs. It sounds obsessive when you say it out loud, but the truth is I had moved there after a bad breakup, and control was the thing that made living alone feel less like isolation. So when I heard my own front door unlock and open in the dark, it didn't just scare me, it broke something. It told me that whatever rules made that house feel like mine were suddenly optional. I kept standing there with my flashlight off, phone screen dim against my hand, listening for footsteps. I expected immediate movement, someone rushing in, drawers opening, heavy breathing, something obvious and ugly. Instead, there was nothing. No sound at all. That somehow felt worse. I called my neighbor, Tom, because he lived across the street and because calling the police felt too large for what might still be nothing. He didn't answer. I texted him that my power was out and I thought someone had just opened my front door. Then I sent the same thing to my sister. Neither message went through right away. Storms had messed with the signal. I started edging toward the hall, trying to see the entryway from the kitchen without fully exposing myself. The house was black except for quick flashes of lightning through the front window. Each flash gave me half a second of jagged detail. Umbrella stand, coat hooks, the narrow runner rug, front door closed. Nothing there. I was about to breathe again when I saw the lock. The deadbolt was extended. That meant the door had been unlocked and locked again from the inside. I stared at it through the dark, trying to understand how that was possible. I hadn't moved from the kitchen. No one had passed me. There wasn't another entrance through that hallway. Either I was misreading what I saw, or someone had come into the house and was now still inside it. My sister finally called. I answered in a whisper and told her what happened. She said the one thing I already knew: get out. The problem was that getting out meant walking directly toward the front of the house, where whoever had come in might still be standing just beyond the entryway. The back door was closer, but between me and the kitchen slider was the breakfast nook with floor-to-ceiling glass. If someone was inside, moving across in front of those windows would make me visible from every angle. I was still deciding when I heard a wet sound from the living room carpet. One step, then another. Not the crisp tap of shoes, not bare feet, something damp, soft, and deliberate. I turned my flashlight on without meaning to, and the beam cut across the doorway into the living room. Nobody, but the carpet just beyond the edge of the light was darker in two oval patches, wet footprints. I backed into the kitchen so fast I hit the counter with my hip. The beam shook violently in my hand as I aimed it lower. Another footprint appeared a few inches ahead of the others, as if something had just taken one more step and stopped. The shape looked almost right for a human foot, except too narrow through the middle, the heel strangely faint, the front too long. Water glistened in it for a second, then began soaking into the carpet fibers. I made a sound I've never heard from myself before, not a scream, more like my body forcing air out because there wasn't room for fear and breath at the same time. My sister was shouting my name through the phone. I told her about the footprints. She thought I meant muddy shoe prints from an intruder. She kept saying, "Go out the back, go now." But I couldn't stop staring. There were only 3 prints total. They came in from the dark living room, crossed 2 feet of carpet, and ended in the open space facing the kitchen. No return prints, no continuation, just 3 wet impressions and empty floor after that. Then, from upstairs, came the sound of my bedroom door opening. I ran for the pantry. It was the only room downstairs with a lock and no windows. I got inside, pulled the door shut, and slid to the floor between bags of rice and canned soup. My sister stayed on the line while I tried to be quiet. We both listened. At first, there was only the storm and my breathing. Then came movement overhead, slow steps crossing the second floor hallway, a pause, then a single heavy thud from my room, like someone dropping onto the bed with both knees. Another pause, then 3 slow knocks directly above me, each one hard enough to vibrate dust from the pantry shelves. I remember looking up at the ceiling without realizing I was doing it, as if I expected to see the shape of feet through the plaster. The doorknob turned. It was gentle at first, testing the pantry door. Then it stopped. For maybe 10 full seconds, nothing happened, and I started to wonder if the sound had been my imagination. Then the handle moved again, slower this time, all the way down until the latch clicked softly against the frame. Whoever was on the other side wasn't trying to break in. They were confirming that I had locked it. My sister was crying now. She said she'd called the police. I whispered that I thought someone was outside the pantry. She told me to keep talking so she'd know if the line went dead. I started saying random things just to fill the silence. What I had for dinner, the color of the pantry walls, the fact that one of the shelves was missing a screw and tilted slightly to the left. It all felt insane, but I needed my own voice in that dark. Then another voice answered me, very close, right outside the door. "You don't have to whisper." It was my voice. Not similar, not close. Mine. Same tone, same pace. Even the little crack at the edge of certain words when I'm scared. For one frozen second, my brain tried to reject what I'd heard because it simply didn't fit anywhere inside reality. Then it spoke again, still using my voice, softer this time. "I know you're in there." I slapped a hand over my mouth so hard it hurt. My sister kept yelling through the phone, asking what happened, but I couldn't answer. I couldn't even cry. All I could do was sit there in total darkness while something wearing my voice stood inches away, waiting. After that, the house went quiet again. No footsteps, no breathing, nothing at all. The police arrived 7 minutes later. Those 7 minutes were the longest stretch of time I have ever experienced. When the officers finally announced themselves and came through the house, I didn't come out right away. One of them had to kneel by the pantry and talk to me through the door until I recognized that his voice was real. They searched every room, every closet, under beds, crawl space, yard, no sign of entry, no broken window, no forced lock. The front door showed no damage and was still locked from the inside. Upstairs, my bedroom door was standing open. The bed had been disturbed, but only slightly, like someone had sat at the edge for a moment and then stood up. The part I didn't tell the police was what they would have dismissed anyway. The wet footprints in the living room were gone. Not dried, gone. The carpet was damp in a broad patch, but the individual shapes had disappeared, as if water had been pressed into it and then smeared away by a careful hand. One officer suggested rain blown under the door. Another said stress can make people connect patterns that aren't really there. I let him say it. I even nodded like I wanted to believe him. I stayed with my sister for 2 weeks after that. When I finally went back to the house in daylight, with movers and all the windows open, it looked smaller, embarrassingly normal, the kind of place where nothing impossible should ever happen. I packed almost everything before going upstairs. My bedroom was last. The sheets had been stripped. The lamp was unplugged. The closet was empty. I was carrying the final box out when I noticed something on the inside of the bedroom door at eye level, written in the thin film of dust that had settled there over the years. Not a sentence, just 4 words traced by a fingertip. Power came back. I didn't. By the time the power went out, we had already been acting like the house was haunted by something ordinary. Not ghosts, not shadows, just a problem we hadn't found yet. For 2 weeks, things had been ending up in the wrong rooms. A TV remote left in the bathroom cabinet, my wallet under the guest bed, a kitchen knife inside the laundry basket with a sock wrapped around the handle like someone had been trying not to touch it directly. Every single time, my husband Mark blamed stress or the kids or lack of sleep. I wanted to believe that because the other explanation was that somebody was inside the house often enough to learn how we moved through it. Then came the outage. It happened just after midnight. No storm, no warning, no flicker first. Everything simply shut off at once. And the silence that replaced it was so complete, I heard my younger son whimper from the hallway before he even started crying. I was awake in bed, scrolling on my phone, and the darkness felt wrong immediately. Not because it was dark, because the house became still in a way that made me feel watched before I had fully sat up. Mark got out of bed to check the panel in the garage. I grabbed my phone and went to the boys' room, using the flashlight to guide me. Both kids were awake and confused, faces pale in the beam. I brought them back to our room because it was the biggest, and because once the power went out, being separated across different rooms suddenly felt impossible. Mark came back a minute later and said it wasn't just us. The whole street was dark. He sounded relieved when he said it. Like a neighborhood outage meant we were safe by default. He went to find candles. I sat on the bed with the boys pressed against me, pretending everything was fine, listening to him move through the hallway and kitchen. Then I heard our pantry door close. It was a small sound, but I knew it instantly. That door had a warped frame, so it always stuck at the end and then snapped shut with a hard little click. Mark had gone the opposite direction toward the garage cabinet where we kept flashlights and spare batteries. The pantry was off the kitchen. I called his name. He answered from the hall behind me. The cold that moved through me at that moment felt physical, like something wet being poured slowly down my back. I looked toward the bedroom door, phone light trembling in my hand. Mark stepped into the room carrying a flashlight and saw my face change before I could say anything. I told him I heard the pantry door. He stood still for a second, listening. Then, from the kitchen, we heard glass clink softly, not breaking, touching, like someone had run a finger along the rim of a drinking glass. Mark told me to lock the bedroom door. I did. He took the flashlight and went into the hall. I hated him for that in the exact way you only hate someone because you're terrified of losing them. The boys started crying harder the second he disappeared. I tried calling 911, but the signal was weak and the call wouldn't connect. I texted my sister our address and just typed, "Someone is inside the house." The message sat there unsent. A few seconds later, I heard Mark shout, "Who's there?" Then silence, not crashing, not struggle, not footsteps, just silence so complete it sounded intentional. I opened the bedroom door before I even realized I was doing it. The hallway was black beyond the weak spill of my phone light. The beam landed on the carpet, the family photos, the bathroom door. Nothing moved. I called Mark's name, and when he answered, the voice came from downstairs. That was impossible. He had left through the upstairs hall. The stairs were on the far side of the landing. I would have heard him cross, but his voice came from below, calm and level. "It's okay," he called. "Come down." One of my sons grabbed my arm so hard it hurt. He whispered, "That's not Dad." Kids say things adults spend too much time trying not to think. He didn't sound dramatic when he said it, just certain. Then the real Mark started pounding on the bedroom door from the outside. I screamed so hard both boys started sobbing. The pounding came again, violent enough to shake the hinges, and his voice broke through it, breathless and panicked. "Don't open it. Don't answer anybody downstairs." I stood there in total confusion, staring at the door, while my mind tried and failed to fit the pieces together. If Mark was outside the bedroom, who had spoken from downstairs? Before I could do anything, he shouted through the wood that he had locked himself in the upstairs bathroom when he saw someone at the end of the hall. He said he had just gotten out. He said whatever it was had gone down the stairs. Then, from directly below us, came the sound of the dining room chair being dragged slowly across the floor. Our bedroom sat over the dining room. I knew that sound too. We had hardwood downstairs, and one of those chairs had a loose leg cap that made a scraping, stuttering noise whenever it moved. The sound continued for several seconds, stopped, then started again from a slightly different angle. Not random movement, placement. Mark told me to get the boys into the closet and stay there while he found something to use as a weapon. I finally opened the bedroom door and pulled him inside. He was soaked in sweat and holding the heavy ceramic base of a lamp he must have ripped apart somewhere in the hall. He shoved the dresser against the bedroom door without being asked. That alone told me how scared he was, because Mark was the kind of man who usually forced fear into practical shapes. If he was dragging furniture in front of a door, then whatever he had seen had gotten past the part of him that explained things. He said he came out of the bathroom because he heard me talking in the bedroom. I told him I hadn't said a word. He looked at me for a long time after that, and in the darkness, I could still see the moment his face accepted it. The dragging downstairs stopped. Then came footsteps on the stairs. Slow, heavy enough to be an adult. No attempt to hide them. Each step creaked in the exact places ours always did. Whoever was coming up had either spent enough time in the house to learn it or didn't care whether we knew. The boys were in the closet by then, clinging to each other and crying quietly. Mark and I stood at the foot of the bed staring at the door while the steps climbed one by one. The last step creaked, then nothing. A hand touched the doorknob. It didn't rattle, it didn't twist hard. It just rested there for a second, and somehow, that was worse. The metal gave one small click as the person outside tested it. Then a voice said, "You moved the dresser." It was my older son's voice. He was 6 feet away from me, inside the closet, making these broken little terrified sounds into his brother's shoulder. But the voice outside the door was his exactly. Same small lisp on certain words, same soft pitch, same breath pattern. "Mom," it said. "Why did you block the door?" Mark made a sound I had never heard from him before. Not anger, not fear, something lower, more helpless. He stepped back from the door like he'd been burned. The thing outside waited a second, then spoke again, still using our son's voice. "I can't see in the dark." My younger boy screamed from the closet. The voice outside stopped. Then the knob began turning harder. Mark lifted the broken lamp base in both hands. I grabbed the cordless baby monitor from the dresser, even though our kids were far too old for one, and we only kept it because the rechargeable light still worked when the power failed. I don't know why I grabbed it. Panic makes idiots of people. We both stood there as the knob turned fully, hit the lock, released, then turned again. Then came 3 hard knocks, then silence, then footsteps moving away from the door. We listened to them cross the landing, not toward the stairs, toward the boys' room. The window in our bedroom looked out over the garage roof. It was a dangerous drop to the lawn, but possible. Mark pushed the dresser away just enough to get to the window, opened it, and helped the boys out first, lowering them onto the sloped roof while I held the phone light steady with shaking hands. He climbed out next, then reached up for me. As I swung one leg through the window, I looked down the upstairs hall. The boys' bedroom door was open. Something was standing inside it, not fully in the hall, just behind the frame, with one side of its body hidden, as if it had stepped out only far enough to watch us leave. I couldn't make out a face. I couldn't even tell whether it was a man or woman, but I could see one hand on the edge of the door, fingers curled around the wood in a way that looked patient, almost relaxed. Then it spoke from inside the room, this time in Mark's voice. "Don't look at it, just come down." Mark was outside the window beneath me when it said that. I nearly fell getting onto the roof. We got down, got the kids into the car, and drove to a gas station 3 miles away where the lights were still on. From there, we called the police. They searched the house after the power returned an hour later. No sign of forced entry, no missing person, no one in the crawlspace, attic, or yard. They found the dining room chair dragged into the center of the room facing the staircase. That could have been an intruder trying to frighten us. Maybe. I've gone over that possibility so many times I could argue it better than a detective. but there are two things I can't place inside any normal explanation. The first is that the boys' bedroom window was locked from the inside and the screen was untouched, which meant whatever stood in that doorway had not entered from outside. The second is what my older son told me 6 months later. After we had moved, and after he had started sleeping through the night again, he said that before the power went out, while he was lying awake in his room, he heard somebody under his bed whispering to him in my voice, telling him to stay quiet because there was a family in the house. The neighborhood lost power in sections. That was the first thing that made it feel wrong. I was standing at the front window when the houses across the street went dark one by one, like someone was moving steadily down the block and switching them off by hand. Porch lights vanished. Living room windows blinked black. Garage coach lamps died in pairs. But our house stayed lit for another 10 seconds, bright and normal in the middle of a street that suddenly looked abandoned. Then our lights cut too, and the reflection of my own face in the glass disappeared. Behind me, my daughter said, "Did you hear that?" I turned around. Hear what? But I already had. A sound from upstairs. Not a bang, not a creak. Something lighter. A quick series of soft impacts moving across the second-floor hallway. I ain't too fast to be steps, and too uneven to be something falling. It stopped above the foyer. We all listened. My wife, Elena, had been in the kitchen rinsing dishes when the power failed. She came out holding a towel in one hand and her phone in the other. Our son was on the couch with a blanket around his shoulders because he was getting over a fever. For a few seconds, we just stood there in the darkened living room, lit only by street spill and the weak blue-white glow of our screens. All of us trying to decide whether what we'd heard had actually happened. Then the sound came again. This time it moved from one end of the upstairs hall to the other in a burst of rapid pattering impacts. Not human footsteps. Smaller, faster, but not the sound of an animal either. It was too controlled, too direct. Like something that knew exactly where it was going. Elena whispered, "Please tell me that's not in the house." I told her it was probably something from the attic shifting with the outage, even as I knew how stupid that sounded. Power cuts do not make things run across hallways. My son said he needed the bathroom. I told him to use the downstairs one. He looked toward the stairs and shook his head so hard I thought he might cry. He wasn't a dramatic kid. That scared me more than the noise. I grabbed the flashlight from the junk drawer and checked the front and back doors first. Both locked. Windows downstairs were closed. The alarm panel was dead. Blank screen. No backup tone. Elena started texting neighbors, but no one was replying yet. Cell service always got unreliable when the power dropped in our area. Then the hall closet door upstairs opened. We all heard it. That old closet had a sticky latch and a hollow dragging sound whenever it opened because the bottom edge rubbed the carpet. The noise came clear through the dark house, followed by a gentle bump as the door hit the wall. My daughter made a small choking sound and grabbed Elena's arm. I should say something important here. Our upstairs hall closet wasn't for coats or storage. It was the access point to the attic crawl space. We kept winter decorations in there, cardboard boxes, luggage, nothing anyone would want badly enough to break in for. The only reason to touch that closet in the dark during a blackout was if you already knew what it was. I told Elena to take the kids into the dining room and stay there. She said absolutely not. That if I was going upstairs, then we were all staying together. We had one of those quick marital arguments people have when both of them are scared enough to stop pretending they're reasonable. In the end, we compromised in the worst possible way. They stayed at the bottom of the stairs while I went up. I can still remember exactly how the flashlight beam looked on those steps. Each tread pale in the center, swallowed by shadow at the edges. Dust on the banister, the framed family photos on the wall catching brief white flashes as I climbed. It should have felt familiar. Instead, it felt like I was walking through a copy of my own house, made by someone who had only heard it described. At the top, the hallway looked empty. My bedroom door was shut. The kids' doors were open, bathroom door half open, linen closet closed. And at the far end, the attic closet door stood open exactly 3 inches wider than normal, enough to show a vertical line of black deeper than the rest of the dark. I swept the flashlight across the floor. Nothing. No person, no animal, no sign of movement. I moved slowly, listening between each step. Downstairs, I could hear Elena murmuring to the kids. Outside, the street was silent in that strange way suburban streets only get during outages, when even people with generators seem to hold their breath. When I got close enough, I reached out and pulled the attic closet open fully. Boxes, suitcases, plastic bins, hanging shelf, the narrow wooden hatch in the ceiling that led to the crawl space. Open. Not wide open, just lowered a few inches, enough to leave a dark gap above it. I stood there, staring up, feeling the cold from that space touch my face. I knew I had locked that hatch 2 weekends earlier when I put the decorations away. It had a hook latch because it tended to sag otherwise. Now it hung loose. Then something moved above me. A quick shift, not in front of the opening, back from it, like something had withdrawn from the edge the moment the flashlight touched it. I backed up so fast I hit the hall wall with my shoulder. Elena called from downstairs asking what was wrong. I didn't answer because in that same second, from directly over my head inside the ceiling, I heard the pattering sound again. It ran. Not across the hall this time, across the attic. Fast, deliberate, moving away from the closet and over the bedrooms in a path I could follow by sound alone. My daughter started screaming downstairs. I turned and saw why. A shadow moved under my son's bedroom door, not across the floor of the hall, under the door, as if something on the other side had stepped close enough for its shape to block the narrow strip of lighter dark at the threshold. The problem was that the room was empty. I'd seen the inside of it from the hall. Empty bed, desk, curtains, no one there. I went to the room anyway and shoved the door open so hard it slammed the wall. Nothing. Then the closet inside the room rattled once. I swung the flashlight over. The closet door was closed. On the white paint near the knob were 3 fresh marks, thin and gray, like something dirty had brushed against it. I took 2 steps toward it and heard Elena halfway up the stairs with the kids. I told her to go back down. She didn't listen. None of us wanted to be alone anymore, not even by 1 floor. My son was the one who noticed the ceiling vent. He pointed up with a trembling hand and whispered, "Dad." The vent cover above his bed was crooked, not much. Just one corner bent down slightly, enough to reveal darkness behind it. The opening was too small for a person, too small for most animals that lived around us. But as all 4 of us stared at it, something pressed very gently from the other side. The metal flexed outward with a tiny tick, then stopped. My daughter started sobbing. Elena pulled both kids back into the hall. I kept the flashlight fixed on that vent, every muscle in my body waiting for it to burst open, for claws or a hand or some explainable horror to force itself through. Instead, from somewhere above us in the attic came a voice. My daughter's voice, small, clear, perfect. "Mom, I'm up here." Every person in that hallway froze. My daughter was clutching Elena's waist so tightly her knuckles had gone white. But her voice came again from above the ceiling, a little fainter now, moving away through the dark. "Mom, come here." Elena made a sound I never want to hear from another human being again. Not a scream. A mother's body trying to go in 2 directions at once. I don't remember deciding to run. I remember grabbing them and forcing all of us down the stairs so fast my son nearly fell. We got outside barefoot, left the front door open, and stood in the middle of the lawn with half the neighborhood doing the same thing under a dead row of streetlights. Other people were talking about the outage, about transformers, about calling the utility company. I kept staring at the upstairs windows. No movement, no silhouette, nothing. The police came after the power returned 40 minutes later. They searched the house, the attic, every closet, every room. They found no person, no animal, no point of entry. The attic dust was mostly undisturbed except for one narrow trail across the insulation near the center. Not shoe prints, not paw marks, just a dragged path like something long had been pulled from one side to the other. We moved out 8 days later. I told people it was because the incident scared the kids, which was true. I did not tell them the part that made it impossible to stay. On the last morning, with the truck loaded and every room empty, I went back inside alone to get the final set of keys from the kitchen counter. The power was on. Sunlight was coming through the windows. The house looked harmless. Then, from the attic directly above me, I heard a child running, small, rapid footsteps crossing overhead, and my daughter's voice muffled by the ceiling, quietly asking, "Why did you leave me up here?"